in the Deer Path Clover Lane area, and how these carports are specifically designed on the side, projecting out, and they're perfectly adapted to the design and actually aren't dominant, but they do project out forward. So I don't know, in some ways I don't think we can simply say a good design is a design where the garage is always flush or back, because as Jenny pointed out, the two houses on Valley Road would not be affected really at all. And I don't know, I mean, I don't see how you could put language in there to stop them from, I mean, so I don't know, to me it seems like a more complicated problem than just a sentence in the...
Well, so the ones that you're talking about is the garage door facing the front also? Or is it just the carports?
Well, in here it says that the garage has to be flush with the front, and the garage is flush with the front in those, so, you know.
I understand a little bit what you're saying, Julie, and especially like in Deer Path and Clover, as some of the garage pictures show, there are homes in town where the garage is a couple feet, forward. This regulation would only apply, though, to new construction. You can repair existing, so it doesn't, it's grandfathered in that, if the wood is rotting and they need to replace it, there's nothing that would prohibit them from doing that. But you are correct that it will be changing going forward what you can and can't do. I think we're going to have to think about the language so that we don't have on Valley Road, the garage, you're right, it makes up the whole facade. So an argument, I think, could be made that says, well, it is flush with the facade. It makes it. We'll work on some language on that, and whether it's, that's why I was leaning more rather than defining facade to talk about the front door and tying it to that, because that's really what we heard from people is houses are part of a community, and a community means the houses have a front door. On the examples where the garages were very far forward, it was hard to find the front door, and that's, I think, a large part of it. So I'm not certain the best way to do that, but I think we have a week to figure that out, and we can come up with some language that the board, in their memo to council, gives some guidance. We can explain it on the 19th to council as to the rationale for the change.
I think some other towns have this same ordinance too. Maybe we could look at those.
I just have two comments about the same issue. One is that there should be some distinction made between a carport and a garage, because that Deer Path Clover neighborhood, as Julie said, those carports are intrinsic to the design quality of the neighborhood, but they're a lot less objectionable. They're a roof with some posts, or there's some very interesting designs actually for the carports. Some that are not original, but are still very sympathetic to the design of the original houses. So I think because they're so transparent, it's not really a mass. It's just a plane that's sheltering the cars. I think that this should be clear. The new ordinance should be clear that carports are not governed in the same way as a garage would actually be. And the second comment that I have is that we as a board, in one of the applications that came here, and there was some concern about dominance of the garage in terms of the overall design of houses that were being proposed. And we actually put a condition on that the width of the garage couldn't be more than a certain percentage of the overall width of the house. And that, if we could work something like that in, would totally prevent something like those Valley Road houses where the whole front, or 85% of the front, is just garage. So I would like to suggest that something like that make its way back, or make its way into the ordinance as well. Some kind of a notion that the garage just can't be an overwhelming percentage of the facade of the building.
I think I need a little guidance from the full board on that one. We initially talked about that, and there was concern that that would not be a quick fix, that we didn't have consensus. In the focus groups, we did talk about doing a percentage, and there wasn't a whole lot of support throughout. I agree with you, David. I think something like that would go a long way to addressing the concern if you're saying, you want to reduce the dominance of the garage. But I do have to take the other side, which was at the task force meetings, when we talked about it, there wasn't a lot of consensus to limit the percentage of the facade to the garage or whatever the standard would be.
Right, I think I support that too, David, but I think these were the kind of, the quicker things that we were doing. So I think we'll keep that in mind when the neighborhood task force will keep it in mind, though, because I think I like that idea, and I think a lot of people on the board do.
I mean, I just wonder whether there's any way to, bring it to council, hear what the testimony is before council, and if there's not a lot of objection, that could get included. If there is a lot of objection,
I think procedurally, we can't add anything that's considered substantive, because that would require reintroduction, and we can't do that, and because will be our last meeting in 2016. So it would be pushing it off until 2017, or it would be putting it on the list for something to take a look at in 2017 and going ahead with the language that's in there now. I think we can clarify the language. It's not a change, but putting a percentage is more than just clarifying.
If I could add, Mayor, I would tend to agree with you, because I'm hoping that I can convince the municipal attorney that adding a definition of facade, or it's clarifying, whereas I think, David, while I agree with you, it's a new standard.
Lee, I had sent you a couple of items this afternoon.
Want me to discuss? I didn't know if you wanted to bring them up, or...
Well, no, this is very minor. I think I just wanted to know whether they were substantive or not. I think that the porch thing should be clarified to be front porches. I mean, it's implied, but it doesn't say so anywhere. And it should also probably be single-story porches, because there are a number of two-story porches that are not, a floor in between or something that are part of the monumental mansion aspect of new houses. So,
yeah, what Wanda and I had discussed was that there are some homes that currently have or used to have a two-story porch, and I had put in a standard, if you look in section 2(1)A, that they wouldn't have a second floor, basically, porch. Again, because concerns, what we were hearing was the mass. Wanda, I didn't know whether that would be true throughout the community or only in a historic district as a way to say that, because I don't have a problem with it when it's appropriate, and something like, historically that there was a porch, but I just didn't know. I'm a little concerned if we remove the language for the second floor, because then we've increased the size. These are no longer just a entry porch, 6 feet wide or whatever. We're allowing an 8 by 25 foot porch, so it's going to run the full length or half the length, depending on the size of the house, of the facade, and to have a large, whether it's a thin railing or it's hard to regulate what happens there.
well, that I don't understand. What I'm saying is that there are houses that have two-story porches, but there's no floor or anything. There's no entrance from the second floor into these porches. They're simply a monumental porch. And they're often about this dimension at the bottom, too.
Yeah, it's just hard to regulate that when they may not have a door today, but they have a window, and the window becomes a door. But if you want us to, because again, if it's existing, it can remain. Or if you want, we can strike the last sentence, which...
Lee, maybe I think you might be thinking of something different from what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think you are, too.
a porch that goes, the pillars on the porch are twice as high as most
By
porches.
interpretation, if that's the case, that's still a one-story. It doesn't have a floor. I thought you meant, can we turn the projector on again? There's everybody.
I can't see.
The house on the right, something like that. That's what I thought you
No,
meant.
I'm telling you about something that looks like drum placket.
Yeah. That's a one-story porch. If it were
If the
cathedral
roof is-
space with, then we'd be counting it as FAR, but we don't count porches for FAR.
I think it would look weird on a street if all the other porches are one-story porches to put a two-story porch. I think that's what you're worried about, right? Because, I can just imagine it would be one of these newer houses that would have a porch that was much higher than all the other porches.
It's a question, and I don't know whether this is just what I see as a loophole that nobody else does, or whether,
Well, if it's just a matter of being able to have the pillars and the porch be a two-story space, by definition, that's still a one-story space because it doesn't have a floor. I thought you meant having
no, it
roof
doesn't,
and then more up above.
no.
But Derek, you would agree that would be your interpretation?
It's a single porch, not a double porch or...
I'd like to suggest that this actually there could be an interaction between this piece of the ordinance and the FAR piece. Because the FAR calculation is being changed so that a double height space counts twice. So why shouldn't that apply to a porch as well as an
External
inside
space.
cathedral ceiling?
They're exempted 200.
Exempt currently, and we just changed the ordinance to exempt 200 square feet of porches, so it didn't count as FAR. If it's not enclosed, would it be counted? Because the cathedral space is enclosed, and that's what we were trying to address. As a porch,
Well, I think the
It would take
cathedral
care-
space adds bulk to the house, maybe 200 square feet if it's 10 by 20, or it adds bulk to the house, which we heard that houses are large and we're looking for ways to limit the size of them. I'm not sure if that, on the right side, if the porch went above that roof, does it add bulk to the house? Is it visually bulky? I mean, that's,
all what I'm talking about.
we could look at it.
I mean...
You don't see a lot of
I'm a little
porches like that.
agnostic about how I feel about this, but I'm just saying that there's a way, I see a way to regulate the height of the porches by using this FAR, making this apply to both unenclosed space and enclosed space. I mean, because I think porches are part of the FAR, right? Anything that's roofed is part of the FAR.
Right, you get a 200-foot exclusion for a covered porch, but with at least one open side.
But if it was covered, it was a two-story covered space,
Then it would
or
be...
more than 12 feet.
would be
If the
counted
roof over the
twice.
porch is more than 12 feet, then it would be covered twice.
right? Because the cathedral
It would be counted
space is
twice.
interior space, and if it's totally enclosed, it's interior space. By having the one side open, it's not.
Okay. Well, I think some of these things we'll just have to pick up on other ordinance changes later, rather than go on with
Yeah, I would also recommend if people have photographs, I think it would help our conversation because I feel like there's a little bit of a miscommunication, and so just having a visual, even if it's a sketch, maybe David can help with a sketch, it would help to
Yeah.
make sure we're all talking about the same thing.
Anyway, does anybody else have anything?
Well, I was wondering if the problem with the definition is taken care of is our garages, is there a definition of garage somewhere else in the ordinance? Because that would take care, there would be carport and garage.
As an accessory structure, I'm being advised, so I think we'll have to give that some thought, and hopefully we can have some recommendation to council.
So
I don't think I'm going to be able to do it tonight.
Yeah. Then the other thing was what we've had a resident bring this up, and I agreed with it, that I think that we should put somewhere that it's a minimum setback, because when you're, even though that's how the ordinance read before the borough, it always read that way, I don't think it's obvious that it's a minimum setback. It looks like you have to.
We've had that ordinance in the borough for 10 years, and it hasn't been an issue.
Nobody
No,
thinks,
I mean, setbacks are boundaries. So that's the way you think of a setback. You have to be within that building envelope. You don't have to necessarily be right on the outer point of the front yard setback or the rear yard setback. So, in most houses, my experience with the zoning board is people want to put the house in line with, especially on the smaller lots, less than a half acre.
Right.
It looks like a missing tooth, or conversely, if you look at Library Place, where the uniform setback is 85 feet and the required setback may be 35, it would look out of place with a house at the 35. So, I mean, it would control it in that instance. On Birch Avenue or Lee Avenue, where your average setback is probably 6 feet and the required setback is 25 feet, most people would want to move that house up because the lots are not that deep. And to put your house back, you're using up all your usable rear yard open space. So it hasn't been a big issue in the borough, and that would be the model that I would look at. And the same accord with the 2-foot plus or minus. That's a case where, I had a case today, somebody wanted to add a dormer addition off of the back of the front roof, and that 2-foot made a difference on the prevailing front yard setback on a property on Chestnut, where, again, the required setback's 25 feet, but the front yard prevailing is 6 feet, and, you know, if they're at 5 feet, and you don't have that 2-foot, they need a variance. They need to spend $1,000 to go to the zoning board, and I just think that a little wiggle room there, it's not really
Yeah.
visible when you look at the streetscape as a whole, so.
okay, well, if you've done it for 10 years and it was written like that and no one's ever else had a question, then I will.
Good point, though.
Okay, anything else, anyone? All going to come to the council meeting and support this? Does somebody want to make a recommendation that we find?
Yes,
Well, before
Are
we do
we
that, I know
having
there's
public-
people who would like to,
people in the public want to
Are we
speak.
having a public portion of this? Okay. Let me open it to the public then.